You're just asking for more hate right now. You know that, right?
Yeah, which is the really annoying bit, because you come in being like, it's going to be really close, and then it's not, because G2 are just so much better. Ah! Hello and welcome to the jungle. I'm Medic. I'm joined by Broxah and Cubby. Today we'll be discussing the LCS, the MVP and rookie of the split in both LEC, and we'll talk both LEC and LCS. Wow, this is the worst intro. This is why we've got Ginny usually. This is the worst intro ever. We're going to talk about the LCS. We're going to talk about the LEC and the LCS MVP and the rookie. We're going to talk about Worlds. But first, we're going to talk about the LEC Season Finals weekend. Let's start off with G2 Fnatic. It's, the one that we always have to talk about. And unsurprisingly, it was a similar result to usual.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's happened time and time again over the last couple of years that, I and many others start having faith in Fnatic, and it seems like they're actually able to play at a level where they can compete with G2 up until the very point where they face each other in the final, and Fnatic just completely mentally seems to fall apart. And it's because it's like, I think what Fnatic has showcased in season finals has not been much worse than G2 overall, but there's just something happening in those series, and when we see a Fnatic in the final under the most possible pressure where it falls apart, and it's a bit frustrating to watch, to be honest.
Yeah, I found it interesting how, this time around, I feel like some of the pieces that have actually been bolstering Fnatic up in past events, like thinking of MSI, like Oscar Aaron, like really exceeded my expectations there. June has been quite good this split, and especially really exceeded my expectations at MSI. I thought each of them had a really tough series this time around. Like in the past, it was kind of, Noah getting beat, just him getting picked at bad times or not being in the right spot at the right times, and then G2 just punished to the, X degree. This time, I really feel like kind of throughout mid to late game, like Mickey really, really outplayed June and was just so big for G2. And then Oscar just did not have the same impact as Broken Blade. And it feels weird because like G2 is a good team, right? But whatever weakness you have or you bring, G2 can beat. Because I feel like even though we're used to this matchup, G2 beat them in a different way this time around, which I found interesting.
Yeah, I definitely am on board with that. It's like someone like Noah actually stepped up big time, and while Hansama had an incredible series and got MVP as well, I believe. Like, I think Noah was really, really solid. I think Humanoid especially also stepped up massively, especially in the first couple of games where he really managed to outperform Caps until Caps started, doing Caps things again. But yeah, I don't know. It actually felt like someone like June, who was expected to do really well, and who at many times over the past months did actually look better than Mickey. I mean, Mickey is somebody we memed on a lot going into season finals, or like the final specifically, because he just kept running it down beforehand. And then when it mattered the most, June wasn't performing, Oscar was struggling. And I feel like the main difference between G2 and other teams right now is, I mean, it's a few factors, but it really seems like the mental, as well as Fnatic and other teams' ability to play macro, is like the main thing. Because the G2 series versus Fnatic was kind of similar to versus MDK, where once they lose one game, they're able to adapt in a lot of ways when it comes to draft and macro and the way they approach team fights and everything. And then after that one loss is just not even close, and they start steamrolling people. And yeah, I don't know. Like, there was a moment in this Fnatic G2 final specifically where, if I remember correctly, Fnatic had the choice between contesting either Drake or Baron in like mid-late game, and it was a pretty important moment, but they were so unsure what to do, and they continued to try to follow the steps G2 were taking the entire time, but they ended up doing absolutely nothing, giving both away, and just, it felt like they were handing them the Nexus on a silver platter. It was, yeah.
It was a Drake or tier 2 top. Like, Caps was pushing in top. Like, it may have been a different moment, but I remember like a very similar moment where all of Fnatic are group mid, Baron's up, Drake's up. I think it's sole point for G2, or they're like getting to 3. And Fnatic, like, oh, we'll play for mid prio. Caps is just pushing in top lane. And they're like, well, I guess we'll try and play around the Drake and kind of put their heads in there, get poked a little bit, like, okay, no, we can't go to the Drake. And then Caps just keeps pushing in, gets the inhib tower. And it's just, I think that's the biggest difference I saw. Like, laning wise, Fnatic were pretty good, right? Like, Oscar had lane leads against BB at least in the first 2 games, as far as I remember. Humanoid was beating Caps in lane. Noah and Jun were definitely struggling a little bit in lane, but they weren't falling like massively behind unless there was jungle intervention, which there was on occasion, right? Hansama and Mickey did have a really good series. But I think the big thing I noticed was map movement and understanding of how to trade up in the mid game. Like, Fnatic would double TP to bot lane to kill Caps, and it's like, cool, that guy's 0-3. G2 just got your mid tower and then played for a position on top tower, right? Like, it's... We heard a lot about G2 through this year, about them working on their mid game and then working on their ability to like and subscribe to this podcast, but also their ability to trade up when they're in like detrimental situations, right? And something we just don't see yet from Fnatic is that willingness to trade up well, or the understanding to trade up well, but also the decisiveness to say, let's just make the call. Like, game 3 and game 4 felt so frustrating if you're a Fnatic fan, because G2 would do a lot of stuff and Fnatic would try and copy them. And it's like, at some point, you just have to say go. And I don't think their comps really lent themselves to that as easily as they could have done. But also, when they did say go, it felt very haphazard. Like, you look at the Jun engage in base. I think it was in game 1 with the 600 stack Smolder, where he flashes in, misses Zenith Blade, misses Solar Flare, and then the rest of Fnatic are just standing behind him being like, cool, I guess. Like, at least if you're gonna engage, even if your support misses everything, just yeet it at that point. Just go. Just because you're not going to defend at your Nexus towers anyway. You're going to lose that game. So I think my biggest frustration with Fnatic is not that they skip steps now, which was my frustration with them at MSI, but that they don't actually take any steps, which might be worse than it was before.
Yeah. But it's strange, right? Because they used to be so aggressive and proactive, and now it's like they were just always so responsive. And like you said, the moment Caps go side lane, even if he's 0-3 or 0-4 on Corki and completely useless, they just have no clue how to respond to it, which I think is a bit mind-blowing considering, the level they're often able to play at.
I think that's a really fair point, especially like given some of the champs that are being played or some of these matchups. I mean, like Razork 3 out of 4 games on Sejuani Maokai. I actually do want to credit G2. I think that their brand reads, picking that like into Maokai Leona, was actually quite good. Just being willing to take that early. But I mean, if you're playing Mao and Leona, like, you should be making plays, should be making dives very early on. And we see Fnatic do that like in the lane phase, but then in the mid game, you kind of have to keep the ball rolling. Because if you allow champs to get their sums up, and the value of your engage tools goes down. You have ways to continuously snowball the game. And we just didn't see them really be able to do that, which is concerning. Now, on the flip side, I was really happy to see G2 put together the mid games that they did, because when I knew G2, the dominant Yankos, Caps, Perks era, that was really where the magic was with them and Mickey X. Was, hey, like, it doesn't matter when we play against these Eastern teams, like how the first 10, 15 minutes go. We might be down like 1K, 2K, 3K gold, but we're going to find plays in side lanes or just create stuff on our own where we are going to turn it around and then get on even footing and team fight just as well as them as the game goes on later. I feel like that was really the magic of that team. And I kind of felt that, like, this split watching G2, which for me was actually a lot of fun. Like, thinking back to when they weren't playing their best league in regular season, coming off of MSI, and that didn't matter because they were still finding ways to make these games that were, should be lost, and some were, but they managed to make those games look so much more competitive than they had any right to do. I think it really speaks to how far ahead G2 is in the region in terms of how they play out those, like 15, 20-minute plus scenarios.
Yeah, I agree. I think G2, like, even if they've struggled, they've always been better. Well, throughout this year, have been better at mid-game than any team in Europe. And I think part of the frustration, if you're a Fnatic fan, is watching Fnatic lose game 1 and saying, how do you lose a game with a 600 stack Smolder? How do you lose a game from this position? And part of that is Fnatic not being as decisive as perhaps they could, but also you have to give credit to G2 in those situations where They're playing the map really well. They're creating pockets. They're making Fnatic make mistakes at times. It's like a forced error rather than an unforced error, although there were a lot of unforced errors in this series as well, as there are in any finals. Like, everyone gets nervous, everyone makes mistakes. Do we have anything else we want to talk about for G2 Fnatic?
I think it was funny that G2 specifically, if we look at both their series versus Fnatic and MDK in the semi-final the day before, they won, like on all their wins, they played Brand or Zyra jungle, and in the two only losses, they played Gwen. So whenever Yike, locked in Gwen, wanting to have some fun, it didn't go their way, but then when he locks in real champions, they actually won fairly convincingly for the most part.
It is interesting, right? Because they obviously think there's something with this Gwen, and I can kind of get it, because she has, like, you can get onto the backline relatively easily, although if they have enough CC and it hasn't been eaten by someone else, you do just get CC'd. But you have long range with the needlework, and you have the ability to flank, because you can just dash over walls, and you can farm really effectively. Like, Gwen farms jungle incredibly quickly. We even saw, like, trying to do the solo 20... Is it level 12 Baron that you can do? Like, it's really... you get pretty low, and if it's ever checked, you just die immediately. But you can solo Baron at, like, level 12 with Nash's Rabadons. It just feels strange that, as you say, the game they lost, they picked this Gwen. Zyra was banned, but Brand wasn't. So, like, why are we not just picking Brand in that spot? Why are we going for Gwen?
Well, that's my point. It felt like the two games that they actually lost, they were just playing a bit to have fun more than anything, and then they started turning it on and went try-hard mode. Whether that's the case, obviously, I can't
it's always
say,
something we've said with G2, right? It's always a possibility that's the case. I don't want to downplay Fnatic's success, right? Because they did win that game convincingly. They played it really well. But you always wonder with G2 if, like, Dylan's, like, a little... I don't want to say too easy on the players when they have these pocket picks, but a little too comfortable just saying, yeah, cool. Gwen, I can see how it works here, right? Because we would never have had the caps, we got to go Vayne moment if Dylan wasn't that flexible. And sometimes putting the trust in players works, and sometimes putting the trust in players doesn't work, on occasion.
Yeah, I'm down for it. Like, I can at least see the theory with, like, W against Smolder Ezreal.
Yeah.
I don't think it was the right comp for it. Like, I guess in my head, like, I kind of want to pair it with a dive buddy. I don't feel like Poppy Rakan is the front line that Gwen wants, right? She kind of wants people to open up space for her. Like, that front line, no one can keep Rel out. That's like the one champion that can kind of screw it.
Yeah, and then in the MDK series, you're playing Cohen versus Ken and Maokai Alistar. That wasn't particularly enjoyable either. But at the same time, I have to say...
Like, it just sounds so bad, man. Yeah. If I drafted that, I'd be like, oh, please, God, just end the game. Not great. Please.
Yep.
I better have the best top-line matchup on the planet for that draft,
I have to say, from a jungle point of view, I would much rather have them put Yike on these aggressive picks than doing what Fnatic did, which is take Razork, the best jungler in the league this year, and put him on Sejuani, Ivan, and Maokai each and every game. That was I feel like that was a bit sad. It's not that the champions are bad, like they're really strong, but something they had a lot of success with in the past was the Nidalee, for example, that was open every game. So I was kind of hoping, okay, you're down, 1-2 losses, like come on, slam the Nidalee. You even have Renekton in the last game where you lose, like just lock it in, do something, spice it up, put Razork on a carry. It would have made it a little more spicy and exciting at the very least.
Maokai is so broken, I don't care. But that is a good point that Razor should have been on a carry.
I mean, I hate watching Maokai.
It's
exactly
so broken,
because he's so broken.
He's just way too good at everything, man. It's not fair.
Yep. Well, you know what I hate?
What is that?
Rel is like, I love the champ because it gives you great moments as a play-by-play, right? They're fun fights to watch. But the fact you can Q flash, and the fact that your flash W Magnet Storm is like, unless people dash out of it, they're kind of just stuck there, and then you get the Shadowing Strike, and it's the 3-man stun. And you're tanky, because you get a shield when you jump in. You can run Aftershock. I think this champ is giga-busted right now. I don't know if she's being nerfed on 14, 17, or 18.
Yeah.
But I think she is B1able. And we saw that. Like, G2 B1'd her in both the last 2 games.
I still don't mind the Alistar handshake. Because, like, I think the theory of that is just... like, when Rel has Flash R up, obviously a lot more threat to be just huge. But, like, if that's not up, I feel feel like in theory, Alistar should be, more effective. Just like being able to deny the combo, and also like cooldowns are kind of similar. And Alistar, like for me, his combo is like faster.
Yeah, I think I agree with you for most of the game. My problem generally is late game
down.
League of Legends.
Yes,
you can just wait for your flash to be back up.
Yes,
right? And it's just such a we win the team fight tool, assuming it's played well.
Yeah.
Right? And obviously, the enemy carries can have flash in that situation, but then you've burnt their flash and you have follow-up CC, or you have Maokai, you have anything else to, like, any other CC to put on top of it, it becomes very tricky for them.
Yeah.
So I think Alistar in lane can work. Rel, I believe, has a bit more movements because of her E, so she can move around the map a little quicker, right, on the resets. But I just think she's so powerful if people aren't super aware of her flashes, and she has Hex Flash as well. You just run Hex Flash, and it's like, yeah, Ali can cancel my combo, but we just sweep behind the Dragon Pit, and then I Hex Flash in, and maybe you get out, maybe you don't.
Yeah,
let's see what happens.
I don't think you can nerf like the Rel combo, so I just like to see E nerfed because you get so much movement speed. You get so much movement speed.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, Rel is just like Alistar and Lona, but with less counterplay. I mean, because Alistar has worked in some games, and the game that MDK beat G2, they did it with a great Alistar performance from Alvaro as well, but it's just so much harder to pull it off. Like in 3 out of 4 games, the Rel is going to come out of top just because of the consistency.
I also wonder if you just take away Q Flash. Like, make it so you can't Q Flash. Because a lot of her power in...
that would destroy the champ.
I mean, it would make maybe it hard. You give her power back somewhere else, right? Like, The problem I find is, we saw so many times, like, a Rel would just walk into a lane, press Q, and then you'd see the enemy laner flash. It's like, well, you have to. And she doesn't have to burn her flash. Obviously, like, it's a mind game of whether or not the person's going to flash, whether you're going to flash. You get these extra spells out, but it feels like it's so non-committal for what it gets you as a Rel. Right?
I agree.
It's like Sejuani just throwing her ult out, but on a 15-second cooldown instead of like an 80-second cooldown, right? Like, because if you hit the Q flash, you get the knock up and you get the Magnet Storm, right? And the guy flashes, but he's probably still in range of you to chase him down with E. But yeah, I just think Rel's a little bit overpowered. I say that because I'm a Nautilus main, and it's can be annoying to play into, So buff Nautilus, nerf Rel, please. Thank you, Daddy Freak. Moving on, MDK versus G2. We hit on it a little bit. Broxah, I know you kind of wanted to dive into this one a little bit deeper.
I mean, I think ultimately both of these series, it was just pretty interesting and impressive how G2 managed to win in a similar fashion. I already touched on it slightly, but it's just like the moment they lose one game, they're so quick at adapting that draft and the way they play, and then they just seem near unbeatable at that point. And I think when it comes to macro understanding of how to play side lane and rotate around the map, the difference between G2 and all other 9 LEC teams is just so massive, which also really showed in this MDK series. And in the first time they played each other, MDK were bringing a lot of surprises in top lane with Lulu top and Smolder top and whatever random stuff, and it felt like it caught G2 off guard. But now that they actually had more time to prep for it, it was very, very dominant and convincing. And I'm really curious to see where the likes of G2 is going to face against NA teams. Hopefully we're going to see that quite a bit at Worlds, because I don't know, like MDK, Fnatic, it felt like I was watching the same series, right? And I don't know, it was just brutal. I think it was a bit heartbreaking to watch how big the gap was for the MDK and Fnatic fans, that is.
I don't know. Again, I like the point that you brought up, Broxah, about only finding their wins on Zyra Brand. Like, again, this series, the brand was so big, and I mean, this is another champion like I feel is actually really broken right now. Because you get to the point where when you get 2 items, it's so hard to one-shot Brand and all he needs to do is just unload one round of his spells, and your team's at half health if you're stacked in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
I really feel like in some of the comps, like they just struggle to find answers into it. Like I think one of the better junglers is Sejuani that was always up. They picked it in game 4, but like then they stacked melees, and so like that can be tough. And G2 had a huge range advantage on them. I don't feel like MDK had a great solution in that champ in particular, and it really hurt them. Because like the first game they tried to play supportive into it, like Ivern, and then it was Lilia. Just keep up with the clear and see what you can do, but if you get picked on Lilia, you're doomed. And then it was like the Sejuani melee stack, which Brand kind of likes, but you can blitz Brand early, and they just did not do that. So, the series didn't feel close, and that's a bummer. Yeah, I feel like we all figured that G2 would win this time around, but I was hoping for MDK to put up a little bit more of a fight.
I agree, and I think like MDK should still be happy overall with what they've done this year. Like I think it's a tricky one to talk about because winter was really good, and then it was kind of shit for a while.
Yeah,
it was very shit for a while, but then the end of the year was pretty good, and I think having good end momentum going into Worlds is probably what you need if you have 4 rookies and an experienced player. I am worried about them at Worlds, and we'll talk a little bit more about our Worlds predictions later on. But I think we've seen each individual player kind of step into a position where you could see them being a really good player, right? And I think that's the important thing for a rookie year, unless you just blow everyone away, like, Caps or whatever. Like, Alvaro had a really good winter. Super had a few really good moments over the course of the split. Even game 1 against G2 was really solid, right? Foscawi's had a few good moments. Mirwin has his pocket picks and can still show some consistency on other things, although I think he's much less consistent on, tanks, etc. So I'm excited for MDK next year, assuming they keep the roster together. It feels like one of those family and friends rosters that will probably stick around for a little bit unless someone gets bought out. But it is, it's frustrating to see G2 win so often in the way they win because they're just better than other teams. But also, like, sometimes I think about what would we do if we didn't have G2, and would it actually elevate the rest of the league, right? Would it be better for them to be close and have that like hope of a title, and not have that brick wall of like the mental wall they always talk about with G2? It's like we can't overcome it. We face them in the finals and we know we're going to lose. Would that be better for the LEC? Or is it better to have a team that is so consistently great that everyone gets something to aspire to? I don't think it's great for G2 that no one fully challenges them, although obviously they lost to MDK and they've lost to Fnatic this year. But I wonder for the rest of the league whether it would be better if G2 just disappeared.
I mean, honestly, I think G2 is very lucky or EU is really lucky to have G2, and I think it's a bit shocking more than anything how they managed to win games, because some of the macro mistakes that are being made against them is stuff that I remember working on when I joined Fnatic in 2017 and 18. Like it's rather fundamental and basic macro and team play that's being messed up. And I think for G2 it really sucks that they have no one really challenging them and keeping them at the top, because it does feel like sometimes they're getting a bit lazy and complacent rather than really pushing themselves to the limit. But for the other teams, I feel like there's no real excuse, because the G2 we've seen for the past couple of months hasn't been a G2 that looked super dominant. And honestly, even going into this finals weekend, I wasn't sure if they were going to be able to win based off of what they've shown us. Like, I think before the finals weekend, the gap between MDK, Fnatic and G2 was incredibly close, but then G2 just win like they always do in the end, right?
I think that NA actually has really benefited this year from having TL, which is like, I mean, the way they've been dominating.
I thought you were going to be like, NA have benefited from having G2 get fucking rinsed by NRG last year. Let's fucking go!
Oh my god. No, I can't show the hubris yet. You know, we got to play the games first. Even though I do feel good right now as an NA fan, you know? But yeah, I feel like TL has actually like really kind of leveled up the region in a way. Like, NA for me has actually kind of lacked this team to chase. that is consistently just better at fundamental League of Legends, like G2 has been in the region, and it's kind of forced to level up. So I would much rather have the team that everyone is striving for. I think that the frustration is that no one's been able to hit it, and it really speaks to how good G2 has been for so long. But that's kind of the dream, like in a league, right? Like you have people chasing the top dog, and everyone is trying to work towards the same goal in a sense, because G2, you just can't beat them. So, yeah, I actually feel like it's actually really helped NA that TL has been in a similar boat. So I'd much rather have the dominant team.
I can agree from that. We agree with that. I think from a broadcast perspective, it makes things a little tricky at times, because it's who's going to beat G2, right? And if that happens so many times, like we had 4 finals this year, right? And when it happens in every single finals, it gets a little difficult to tell a story in a positive way. For personal experience, I had a moment in. I'm going to totally derail the podcast here, guys. We're going to talk about casting and broadcasting. So I had a moment at the end of Game 2 of Fnatic versus G2 where I said, Munich, stand up, soak it in, you're witnessing, or you're living through history or something, right? Because it was close, right? First game, 50-minute banger. Second game, Fnatic managed to win it. I was like, cool, this is a great moment. If you're a Fnatic fan in this moment, you see the trophy, right? You're like, oh my god, 6 years of hurt, it's ended. And I think part of a caster's responsibility is to embody the fans to a degree. Right? Like, I don't think you should ever be as biased as a fan would be, but I think you should share that passion with them in a way that feels natural and fun, right? And there were a few people who tweet about Rich. You guys know H2K Rich?
Yeah.
Yeah, he tweeted about it. And like, he has takes. Some of them I agree with, most of them I don't. But he tweeted about it and said, can't believe Medic's casting this like a world final, right? And I realized that it's tricky at times to cast European League, because everyone expects G2 to win and everyone expects us to get fucked at Worlds. And so finding this balance of how do I talk positively about other teams and get excited for them when everyone thinks that G2 are just going to win has been really difficult for me this year. And I think it's probably difficult for most people, right? I think if TL, like they went back to back to back to back, right? 4 splits in a row. If that had continued for 3 more years, I think NA would really struggle to talk about other teams as well, right? Because it's always a who's going to come second. And you get called disingenuous if you're like, oh, maybe Fnatic can challenge this year. Maybe Fnatic can do this one. Like, the start of the Reddit thread for G2 Fnatic was, cool guys, when's G2 going to win? You know? It's like, this could be an email. This could be a phone call. We don't actually need to have the series because we all know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know. It can definitely be very tricky. But, I mean, to be fair, often how it feels, at least in summer finals and now in season finals, when they face each other for the trophy, it feels like it's closer than the result actually showcases. Like,
yeah, which is the really annoying bit, because you come in being like, it's going to be really close, and then it's not, because G2 are just so much better.
No, but even like after the first 2 games in the finals we just had, like, I sat thinking there was a legitimate chance that Fnatic would actually win the trophy now. It felt like a 50-50. And in summer finals, when they played, Fnatic were really far ahead 3 games in a row. And clearly were way better in the early game. And most of those games felt very winnable. But it's like, there's a lot of reasons to have hope. And I feel like people should also be allowed to have hope and hype up the other side, because otherwise it's just going to be really bland and boring. And I mean, at the end of the day, all it took was Fnatic being able to adapt and play macro slightly better, and it really could have been one hell of a series, but it just wasn't meant to be again.
Yeah, I mean, I get that challenge, like in terms of casting, like kind of like what do you want to bring? I mean, like in your shoes, that is the one stadium final, so like I'd want to bring some heat, right? And yeah, I will say the one take that I should have fought back on that you had, that H2K Rich was right about, was when you said Broxah was a top 2 jungler in EU history. That wasn't on our topic list for the week, Medic, and I didn't want to hurt Brox's feelings, but I don't got you at number 2, Brox. I'm sorry. I
have thought about it more since then.
Okay.
I have thought about it more since then, and I think I was hasty. I'm sorry, Brox. I think I was slightly hasty.
Your criteria was who made Worlds Finals, which he would be top 2.
Yeah, he's definitely top 2 in junglers that made Worlds Finals.
I mean,
so
when you said it, you did literally say, you know, you were partly memeing and just looking at World Finals. So if
I mean,
somebody's
it's
so
true.
angry over
I
that, that's
should have
really
pushed back,
cool.
though, yeah.
Who's ever going to take that as context? Why does context matter? Like, come
Yeah,
on, Broxah. Let's do it. Jungle tier list right now. Let's go. Okay, so who have we got? Jankos, Elioyo, Razork, Darian, Broxah.
Darian.
Not Darian, Diamond Prox.
Diamond
sorry.
Prox,
Yeah,
yeah.
Diamond Prox, my bad. Who else have we got?
There's no way we're doing
Trick.
this, man.
Trick is probably...
You're just asking for more hate right now. You know
No,
that,
but
right?
this this is 100% off the cuff.
But
if people want to clip this out of context and tell us we're
100%
idiots...
surely, no matter what we say, people are gonna hate watch again because you can't win. That's the problem.
Yeah, I know we can't win, but I just
Hate
think
watching
it's a
is
fun...
clicks.
This is for us, right? If people enjoy us talking about junglers through LEC history, cool. This is entirely off the cuff. We're probably going to miss players, but I have Cubby, who's very smart. I have Broxah, who is a world finalist jungler. And I have me, who's just going to fucking bullshit my way through this. So we're going to make our top 5 junglers in European history, okay?
Oh.
Jankos number 1.
Where's Razork now?
That's a good question. Hasn't won an LEC title.
I'm gonna be honest, and this may sound harsh. I think Razork is the best jungler in EU right now.
Yep.
But if we include somebody who's never won the LEC or achieved anything at Worlds, we're trolling.
Okay.
I mean, I understand. Like, I understand there's an element of wanting to look at people's individual performances and how good you think they are in a given moment. But it needs to be a combination of how good was this player at the time compared to everybody in the region, and whether or not they were able to elevate the region's play in that role. Individual performance and consistency over certain years, and achievements.
Okay.
This is an area where someone like a Diamond Prox, I think, is incredibly hard to rank, because if it comes to elevating the play of the region, Diamond Prox would be number 1. But he also was in the early stages and hasn't achieved what Jankos did, which leads to me wanting to say that due to longevity and achievements and whatnot, Jankos would be over him. But there's so many factors to take into account, right?
And that's why we say it and people clip it out of context. That's why it's so joyous, Broxah. Okay, so the list I have, and this is random, like I just grabbed like Jungler of the Split and people that have won titles, right? Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Jankos, Broxah, this is just, no particular order before you flame me. Jankos, Broxah, Razork, Elioyo, Trick, Yike, only because I was looking at people with the most titles. Yep. Cyanide, Rainover, Malrang, Diamond Prox, Xerxes, Inspired. Do we have any other junglers that we want to put on this list?
Inspired would be on my top 5 list, probably. He was...
For LEC junglers.
Yeah, I know. How many years was he there for? Because like that's what matters. Because
only
like when
couple,
he was there, he was really good.
Him, but I think he got MVP, won split in the LEC.
Yeah, he was in Rogue for 2 years.
But
only
he
2?
also,
okay. Yeah.
I think he really. Okay. I mean, he did get MVP. He was a really good jungler, but Rogue didn't win with him. They ended up winning.
Malrang,
finding more success with Malrang.
Mm-hmm.
Which also makes it tricky, right? You could also look at someone like Selfmade. Selfmade, I think, was incredible. But he did make it to World Quarters, and they almost beat Top Esports, making it to semis, which would have been freaking crazy, because who knows what could have happened if they achieved that. But that's what I mean, right? Like, how much do we value the individual play versus leveling up that team and achieving certain things?
We can value it however much we want, Matt. That's the joy of a tier list. That's the joy of saying this person is the first best, this person is the best.
Then let's quickly, all 3, just drop a top 3 and leave it at that.
Okay. I'm just quickly going to look through to see if there's any other junglers I've missed.
You added a bunch
list.
of names that I'm looking at in front of me. I'm just quickly looking at the list, and then I'll
Do we want Snoopy on the list?
No.
Do we want Sven Skaren on the list?
Ooh.
No. Because he started really shining in NA, not EU.
Yep, agreed.
I don't know. His in Italy, like he was good. I just don't think he was winning in EU.
I mean, I think
that team was good.
Sven Skaren never won in EU.
Yeah,
he would be in the NA discussion. Like, he wouldn't be number 1, but he would be in the conversation at the very least.
I still remember him being really good in SK.
do we want amazing on the list?
That's
Honestly,
another question. I would say he definitely deserves a mention and deserves to be on the list. Have you mentioned what list you have added in front of us? You probably should say it out loud, otherwise.
I did say it out loud.
Okay.
I said it out loud. We've added self-made and amazing to it now. I'm just checking through to see if there's anyone else we might have missed who could be there. We also have Rainover, no. JWoww, no. Kikis? Gilius? I don't think either of them would make my list.
Okay. I am not gonna mention my own name, because nothing good is gonna come out of it.
Nah, you need to put yourself second for the memes, Mads! That's the whole point of this!
No matter where I put myself, someone out there is gonna be real salty, because I saw some of the salt that you were referring to. I got tagged in this shit as well, and it was actually mind-blowing. Like, I saw some people on Twitter saying that I was the 10th best jungler Europe has had or some bullshit. I mean, that's fine. That's cool. I can deal with that. It's okay. People remember what they want to remember, and that's fine. I think 1 is Jankos, 2 Diamond Procs, 3 arguable, but I think 3 for me would be either a, and again, it's hard to judge, but some of the first names that come to my mind, and I am excluding myself from all this, are like Cyanide and Rainover specifically. But I don't know how much of that is really nostalgia, and obviously also in terms of individual skill level and whatnot.
yeah.
They were not able to play at the level we're seeing from the likes of Razor, Galioya, Selfmade, Inspired, etc. Like, I don't know. I think Jankos 1, Diamond Procs 2 is definitely reasonable.
I agree.
After that, I don't know.
Yeah, I think those two, like Jankos has to be 1, and Diamond Procs for me has to be like top 3.
It's interesting, because I agree with you in terms of if you value contribution to how jungle is played, right? I think you could also quite easily argue for Trick up there. It won MVP, 2 splits, had
Trick
incredible performances.
you're right. I forgot about Trick for a second. Trick was massive on G2.
He was big. It was just like he fell off, right? So I feel like that's why.
But that's the problem, and this is what I think is unreasonable, because people, and this is what I meant, they want to remember.
That's what they remember.
Or they remember what they want to remember. But ultimately, I would value a player having a couple of insanely great years where they were really elevating the play and achieving a lot over a player that's been consistently good individually, but who has never achieved anything.
For example, Diamond Procs had 1 good year in the LEC, or in the EU LCS. He went 2nd place in EU LCS 2013. He was 3rd place in 2013 summer. And then he went 5th, 7th, had to go through promotion tournament, 5th, 8th, 5th, and then went to the LCL. And I can quite easily see the argument that Diamond Procs revolutionized jungle in Europe. However, in the LEC,
he also I mean, for him it also started before EU LCS was even created.
That's the thing. Like, he was incredible
in Season 2.
But he wasn't EU LCS incredible, or he was for 1 year, right? And that's not to take anything away from him. Revolutionized counter jungling. Like, made the region think about the fact you can do this as a jungler. So I think we all agree Jankos 1. I think either it's probably Trick for me too, and then it's probably Mads.
I will. I'm so
probably
tempted to put Razork on this list, even though
I can see Razork on the list. It's just like, do you value actual accomplishments or do you value the eye test? Right, he's been incredibly good, best jungler in the league this year.
Yeah,
but does he need to achieve something to hit your top 3?
Well, you know, G2's unbeatable, so.
I think you also gotta keep in mind there's very different ways of jungling and approaching the role.
Yeah.
For example, I think someone like NX Smithy was always ridiculously undervalued in North America because he was more of a supportive style jungler who didn't stand out to extreme extents individually, but he was so good at making all his teammates look amazing. whereas Blabber has always been more of like a super carry style jungler who gets a lot of resource and therefore more visibly stands out. In Europe, it's the same, right? Like there's a lot of different approaches to the role, and even if we just look at some of the Fnatic junglers in front of us, like the way that I or Razor or Reno or Cyanide or Selfmade has played is amazing too. Is so different.
I do wonder if I'm undervaluing El Yoyo. I'm trying to think because he's a very good player. In his rookie year, he won 2 splits. And that was like when it was a split was a championship rather than, you know, a winter. He's also won 1 split since then with 4 rookies on his team, or 1 shield since then with 4 rookies on his team.
I think one thing that's safe to say is Europe has always been pretty stacked when it comes to junglers, which is part of why this is, you know, even fairly difficult to discuss. I think there's been a lot of great junglers over the years. And I don't know.
Just put yourself first, Broxah. Just do it, man. Screw Jankos, he's old. You could take him.
I'm not going to comment on where I would put myself, because again, I'm going to get hate no matter what, and that's okay. People are mostly going to think about the struggles in North America, and that's fine.
Well, that's our tier list. Undisputed, 100% true tier list in the world. Jankos first, and then we're not quite sure.
We prep for that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. Like, I think you can argue for literally anything after that, depending on how you look at a top player within the role.
I did see an interesting discussion on Twitter the other day of why did we stop top 20 lists for Worlds, right?
Oh, this was the same reason. That was
it's exactly the same reason, right? Like, I understand part of an analyst's job is to like analyze and to put our information into the world and be like, hey, this is my thoughts on this. However, if you can choose between not doing a bit of content or doing a bit of content, when you do that bit of content, you get death threats from people or just very much like vitriolic hate from people because you put one player one position higher than they thought they should be, or if you put an EU player in the top 20, why would you ever do that bit of content? There's no point.
Yeah, I enjoyed the content.
It's good. Top 20 was great.
It was, yeah. I'm kind of bummed that that's not the case because like I was the individual was like, you know what? It is fair that like, you can put that person from like 5 to 7, or like the discussion of when JDG was Thanos, like. Would you put Ruler or Kanavi at 1? Like when they're both like I found that discussion to be interesting. I had Ruler, but I could see how it could be Kanavi, right? So yeah, I kind of miss those.
I miss them too, and I think there's an important distinction that I'm going to make for people who say, well, other content creators do these sorts of lists, right?
Yeah.
Other content creators get paid for the views on those lists, right? Like if I'm a freelancer, which I am, right? If I wanted to make a top 20 list. I could eat that, make it for myself, and be like, hey, I'm going to get views. And like, if there's some hate in there, cool, but I'm going to make money from the video. If you are hired by Riot to make a top 20 list, and it's the LOL Esports top 20 list, either as a freelancer, I would get paid a set sum, and I wouldn't get anything more than that. Or if you're full-time salaried, you don't get paid more for making that top 20 list. So there's the big difference between, like, if Kadriel wants to put out a top 20 list, you'll be like, oh, but Kadriel does it, and he still gets hate. It's like, cool, that's his choice. He can decide to put himself in front of that bus or like put that out there, right? But if you're any salaried Rioter or even me, right? Like I'd get a set sum for that, and it's like, well, that set sum isn't worth the amount of hate I'm gonna get for putting this out into the world, especially with like Worlds lists, because people will just tell you haven't watched the region enough, and they'll be like, oh, can you not remember that one time in week 3 when Breon played up against T1 and Zeus got a sweet flank counter kill? You should put him 6 places higher because of that. It's like, cool. Nice. Great.
Yeah, I mean, I've always hated doing tier lists personally, just because nothing positive usually comes out of it. I know a lot of people that work on LEC refuse to do tier lists as well, for the same reason. I think generally, when you do these things, like if it comes to ranking the best players in a certain role or whatever period, or doing top 20 lists as Worlds, I mean, ultimately you're just looking at and celebrating people that have achieved a lot and that, you know, have done something great for the region. And I think it's a shame that it often turns into a bit of a salt mine more than anything. I think these kind of discussions tend to get a little bit heated and tricky on the internet, but that's part
But
of the
they're
experience,
fun.
I guess.
They're fun, Mads.
They can be fun, except when I'm randomly being tagged and I see hate threats about me on fucking Twitter when it comes to this jungle discussion, which is
I'm
why
sorry,
I didn't want to dive too much into it.
That
'Cause
was
it's
never
like-
my intent to, like, when I said it,
no,
a few
but
weeks
mine
ago,
either.
it was never my intent.
It's a perfect example. It's like a little meme taken out of context and turned into this toxic, frustrating spiral that no one ever asked for, right?
People just having conversations with themselves, right, and assuming what you've said and done.
Yeah.
And like we all do it, right? And tons of people will read a headline on Reddit and be like, "Oh, this is what that player said," and not actually look at the article. Or you do it with news and everything as well. It's just this like bias that we have where you just take what you assume the person's position to be. Moving on to Assault Mine, C9 and the LCS
Oh.
Championship. Well. I will put my hands up. I had 100% surety that it would be FlyQuest C9 and TL in
I did
the
too.
top 3. And yep, I think like 10 out of the 11 people on the LCS had it as well. I saw an Azael tweet being like 95% of every analyst was like C9 are going to win. Spoilers, they didn't. Ended up losing to 100 Thieves 3-1. Cubby, should we start there, or do you want to start with TL versus FlyQuest?
Now we got to start with the juicy topic here on the jungle.
Okay.
Medic. It's got to be C9 dropping. I mean, I feel like FlyQuest kind of showed the playbook to other teams in playoffs of how to beat C9, and then the adaptations that C9 made just did not work for me. Like, I did not get the LeBlanc prio, and it's funny because I feel like LeBlanc is a champ that JoJo is very good at, should fit his playstyle. But it's also a champ that I know, going back to even Academy days, that he plays when he feels like things are in trouble. Like, it is kind of a crutch champ for him, right? Like, it's that and Silas, two of the champs that he really can lean on. And you just can't play this champion into the very broken Maokai that we were talking about earlier. It just doesn't work. And I think that your ability to pop enough health off people, like the timer you get right now just isn't long enough. We've seen some people play around with the Blanc in LCK in other regions. I'm just not a fan of this champ right now, and I find it so weird. Like, so telling that what C9 has to lean on is picks like that, because the story of C9 this season, like whether it be Reapered or not, is this team was a significantly worse team outside of the first 15, 20 minutes of the game than they were within the first 15 to 20 minutes of the game. And they just were not able to come together and play the game the way that other teams are able to. And 100 Thieves, a team that really can't lane for shit, and it's a really good thing they swapped out Meech for Tomo, because Tomo was that buff that they needed in the bot lane that just gave themselves a lot better footing early on in the game. They ended up making the move that really saved their season and propelled them to Worlds. I mean, they deserve all the credit in the world. This is such a young team that's going. Outside of River, everyone's really young, and I think only Ayla's attended World, or Ayla and River would be the two that attended Worlds. Yeah. And for Ayla, it was pre-COVID, I believe, or it was either that or 2020. So yeah, I mean, I mega props to 100 Thieves on pulling this off, because this is one of the bigger upsets that we've ever seen.
I think what was there were a lot of things that were interesting and surprising to me about this series. One of them was that JoJo had a pretty rough series, to say the least. He did not perform the way you would expect from him. And I think, I don't know if there was an element to not being able to deal with the pressure for C9 as well. And I'm targeting JoJo a little bit here because he was the one where it was most obvious. But he just came in with such a C champ, kill champ, kind of solo queue mentality that often led to him getting caught randomly or being the first one to die in fights, like literally countless times. I think JoJo and Blabber overall got outperformed pretty heavily by Quid and River, who both played fantastic. I think Golden Glue, their coach, did such a fantastic job creating a team with really good fundamentals that, also came in with good prep and was able to beat C9 from a drafting point of view. And like you said, then bringing in Tomo was also, now in hindsight, quite genius, right? And I think it's really cool to have a team I guess a bit similar to an MDK in Europe that is able to surprise because they seem to have such a good structure around them, such good fundamentals, and that you seem eager to work together and actually play as a team, because that can make such a big difference in these moments.
I do want to shout out Spooks as well on the staff. It was like former Golden Guardians. And that Golden Glue would definitely give shouts to as well. But I'm really happy for Golden Glue. It's funny because like obviously I covered the tier 2 space, right? So I followed like APA and JoJo quite a bit. I would have never I would have had APA and JoJo's like career trajectories flipped going in.
Yes.
I really felt like watching like in Academy when JoJo was 16, like this kid like was, and I still really believe like is a special player. But like looking back now to see APA go international for 3 splits in a row and JoJo just not a 10 since APA has joined the league is pretty crazy to me. Because like, APA was always a grinder and always someone that had a different read on pools. But I mean, this is a player that I feel like people forget he had enough confidence in to throw him into a team where he could not speak the same language they were speaking, but that he would play map just well enough to be an upgrade as a rookie. And then like individually just kind of like bolster himself throughout the like along the way. I feel like that's really cool. Now also as an Academy caster, I covered Spawn and Golden Glue when they coached teams down there. These guys met in finals like multiple years in a row. They had like a little bit of a friendly rivalry. And it's really funny because like the team's identity that they had in those leagues, Spawn they had the strict macro team where they were the best rotations, the best at using Herald and like fighting for both. And then Golden Glue's team was, they had better hands. They played a little bit more loosey-goosey, but the teams could get ahead and like find wins. And that's exactly how the teams play today, which I find really cool. Because it at least shows that like it's so hard to know what a coach actually brings to a team. But if I see you have a similar identity at 2 different levels with 2 different groups of players, like that does say a lot, right? And the fact that 100 Thieves like managed to make that work, beat the super team in C9 and now go to Worlds, I mean, there are a lot of NA fans excited just to send Sniper and a young crew to Worlds, just to see like what they learn and what kind of impact they can have moving forward.
Oh, 100%. Like I think NA sending rookies again is really cool, right? Like I think one of the things that we saw after the success of APA was more willingness from NA to kind of play to their rookies rather than just yeet people in from other regions, right? And I think you're starting to see that really come to the fore here with like Tomo doing really well, Quid doing well, Sniper doing well. I do find it interesting that you talk about like Golden Glue being a little bit more loosey-goosey as a coach, because you kind of see that reflected in the players he has, right? Like if I was to say, oh, you can have Corja J and Impact, or you can have, Sniper, Quid, Tomo. For Golden Glue, Sniper, Quid, Tomo is much more his style than Corja J and Impact, which is Spawn's style of we're going to be a bit more methodical, we understand the game really well, and yes, we might not out-hands people as much, but we don't need to, right? And I still think, obviously, mechanically, TL are a very good team. But the inventiveness of 100 Thieves, and especially of Sniper, who I believe got Rookie of the Split,
it was Masu.
Oh, it was Masu. Yeah, no, I said that even before I should have written it down. Yeah, but yeah, I think Sniper should definitely be in the running. Did they vote on it before this weekend?
Yeah, it was a regular season vote. Like,
okay.
It was after regular season with the rest
then
of the
Masu gets it. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I think Masu's been like really good all split. Like I feel like Masu's deserving. He was the player that I had the most confidence in terms of being promoted. So like Sniper for me has actually really surprised me. I know he was an insane solo queue talent, but he took a split off before going pro, and I didn't feel like his laning was that good. But he's really leveled up, and even like in games here, like the game 4, I mean, he was set pretty far behind and still managed to find ways to play. Like that's a vast improvement to the Sniper that we saw earlier in the year and even earlier in the split. So I mean, props to him. Like it's really hard not to root for him. Like he's like he has talent, but also like he is a lot of fun. And that is the one thing I really appreciate about this team, and like what 100 Thieves are like able to manage is I talked to them after they won their first playoff match, and they were like, yeah, like we feel invincible, like we're going to Worlds next week. And they didn't manage to beat TL, which is fine because I don't think anyone else is going to manage to beat TL, but they managed to pull it off, and like they had a lot of confidence. They were having a lot of fun. Like they're all chatting in game 4, like bring back Fudge, right? Like this team has flair, and I do think that like really helped them kind of overcome C9 because they didn't seem scared of anything in the playoffs. And if you are a young team with no expectations, it's really all you can ask for, right? Like embrace that. And I really feel like 100 Thieves are able to do that.
I think it's so cool that Sniper specifically actually managed to make it all the way to the LCS.
Yeah.
Because I know when I came to NA in 2020, he was well known in solo queue already at that point, and people would hype him up as this 13, 14-year-old future superstar of NA, and he was smurfing on people in solo queue with like Irelia and Riven, and he was really aggressive. He had a really good mindset, and he was streaming at the time. I think I was messaging a bit back and forth with him at some point as well, but ultimately, sometimes when you see some of those storylines actually come to fruition, and you see this player that was so good in solo queue make it, it's absolutely awesome, because I think in both EU and NA we often talk about these players that have so much potential but that never get a shot, and this guy is the perfect example of what can happen when you take in someone, give them a shot, and they actually not only have the skill set, but also have the willingness to give it 100%. And massive props to 100 Thieves for also picking him up so early, because he's been part of the program for, I think, how long? Since like end of 22?
They grabbed him when he was 15, and I know that they probably wouldn't have had a team that year in Tier 3 if they didn't grab him when he was 15, and then they grabbed him when he was 16, and it may or may not have been a part of his contract that he was going to start the following year. Like they had supreme confidence in this kid, and I mean, he was like probably the most exciting prospect outside of JoJo. I always love to say he's a generational prospect, like given his brother, twin brother, and then older brother Viper, who did go to Worlds as well. It's really cool. So I'm excited for him. He worked really hard. He's got a lot of confidence. He's like been pretty real about like where he's been at this split. But to see him like kind of do this in his first split, I agree with you. It brings a lot of confidence like to the region that, you know, if you are good enough, like you can make it in this league, and it definitely shows there's opportunity for people to still like really kind of make a name for themselves here.
Yeah, I think the commitment as well from the LCS teams has been really admirable. Like APA had such a bad start, like it was diabolical. Yeah. Even Masu, even Busio to a degree, right? All had really bad starts, and then the fact that the teams have stuck around them and built around them is something we don't see as often in Europe. I think a lot of people right now might look to Yike and be like, hey, he's been okay, but he's really streaky. Maybe we need a better jungler for G2. But I hope that G2, or at least a team in the LEC, continues to stick by him, because he does have a lot of talent, right? So I really look forward to seeing how they progress. We talked a little bit about 100 Thieves C9. Do we want to break that down anymore? Maybe from the C9 side? As, you know, they really shit the bed, and it wasn't just draft. Was it just JoJo struggling?
So I linked a post that Ashley King made. Shout out to Ashley King, always does amazing content. Which LCS super team was the biggest shock? And she listed a few examples, and there were a couple more in the thread. But 2020 TSM group stage just 106. I'm gonna leave that out of there because for me that actually wasn't too shocking. But the other ones, we have 3 years in a row now where we've had super teams fail to make worlds in NA. It'd be 22 TL, that was the Bwipo Hans Sama lineup with Santorin, Bjerg, and Core to round it out. FlyQuest last year, which was the Prince Vikla with Spica, Vulcan, and Impact. And then this year, C9. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of curious. Like, I feel like this is the biggest surprise, given the level of C9 all year, to not make it. But I don't think it's the biggest flop. But it's definitely up there. And it's kind of funny how, like, we have had 3 years in a row where the super team doesn't make it. And EU, in a way, is somewhat the same with the couple iterations of Vitality, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's Vitality keep making super teams are failing. And there was that one G2 one with Reckless. That roster collapsing as well. That
was probably one of the biggest you can ever come up with. That was brutal.
Yeah.
I think...
Sorry, Broxah, go ahead.
I think the Worlds 2021 for CSM feels so brutal in hindsight, partly due to the way they lost games and the 9-man sleep memes and whatnot. But at the same time, they ended up in a group with GNG, Fnatic, and LGD. So, with that in mind, I don't think them going 0-6 was the biggest of surprises. And then, honestly, I feel like all these super teams you mentioned not making Worlds is kind of crazy. I would say the least surprising to me is probably FlyQuest, because while
Really?
I think so personally, because while
Okay.
bringing a prince to North America was crazy. Like I thought this guy would come in and just dumpster everybody in the beginning. We have seen like really insane individual players being grabbed from Korea coming to NA and not being super successful in the past. And I think, I don't know, I feel like while Team Liquid and C9 did take some risks in their roster building, they went for a lot of proven players that would normally be like a given when it comes to making worlds. And I don't think they took as many risks as FlyQuest did, but I'm curious to hear what you're thinking.
I think FlyQuest took a little bit more risk, but I think they were the biggest surprise just because they were legitimately terrible in summer. Like they missed playoffs, and
That's true. It
like,
was shocking how they didn't make it.
So like Prince Vikla, like I thought really highly of Prince. Vikla was not as much, but like Vikla was, I think, going to be fine. And then the rest of the core, like it had impact Vulcan. A lot of teams in NA that have had impact in Vulcan have experienced success with either player or both. Yeah, I think just given how bad that summer was, that was the biggest surprise. But I would put C9 next. I don't count the 2020 TSM because they won playoffs on, like they made a hell of a run to actually win that playoff. And I know the Worlds was tragic, but I didn't think like that highly of them going into that Worlds, just given the season they had. So yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. I think like the C9 roster just should be so much better. Like they introduced Thanatos. Chronicler like literally was praying to any god that would listen that no one would take this player away from the LCK. He was meant to be the next Zeus equivalent, right? He was meant to be the next great top laner in Korea. Berserker, when he came in, was meant to be like this revolutionary AD carry. And you've seen bits of that, right? Like he played incredibly well for a while, but the fact that this team, in the manner that they lost 100 Thieves, is truly shocking. I think I'd be tempted to put it above the FlyQuest one, but only I guess because FlyQuest lost worse, then maybe C9 gets a pass because they almost made it, but they still didn't make it. That's all that history's going to remember. Like no one remembers you placed fourth. They remember that you didn't make Worlds.
Yeah, I think it is shocking at like seeing just the decay of play from like JoJo and Berserker throughout this year. Like compared to where they were at, and then
That's
also
been
like
scary.
Blabber.
Yeah, like wow.
Like I don't know how Blabber got first team All Pro. That's a different discussion. But I like we don't see the same direction from Blabber, where he was like always the most efficient jungler. Every play he makes is going to work. Like we have kind of seen him get stuck or like try things that just aren't there. More and more, I think, throughout the split, and that's been kind of weird for me to see as well. Because obviously, like. If you're an NA fan, you think highly of Blabber. He is one of the best players who's ever played in the league, but he just didn't have as good of a split or year this time around.
I wonder how much of it is just difference in approach and them disagreeing on how to play the game, because I've never believed that a player individually will start randomly looking so much worse almost out of nowhere if there isn't a bigger reason for it. And what we see from the outside is like maybe 20-30% of the story and what's actually happening, right? Like I think objectively Jojo and Blabber, who have been struggling, should be some of the best players in North America if being put in the right scenario with the right teammates around them. I think out of all the things you mentioned, C9 not making Worlds now probably to me is the most shocking. I think I already touched on FlyQuest and the CSM group stage. I think what I expected out of the C9 makes it to me more shocking than Team Liquid not making it in 2022 is that while they do have a lot of strong opinions, they did bring in a Repod who usually is so good at creating a great structure and making sure the teams have the right fundamentals and aligning them and getting everybody on the same page. So I can't believe, even someone like he wasn't able to do that. Whereas the 2022 Team Liquid with Weebos and Torrent, Bjergsen, Hansama, and Core was a lineup that would either function extremely well or completely fall apart due to them all having extremely strong opinions and being unable to align on how to play the game, which is what happened. Like, I had a lot of faith in the C9 actually just leveling up massively. So I can't believe that they could manage to do that with all the cards that they had available in their hand.
Yeah. I also think that Reaper deserves some blame because like this team clearly stagnated for me. And that was a big problem for them, at least in playoffs, like trying to win in this patch.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah.
Going into spring, was C9 one of the favorites to win that? Or was it always TL and then maybe C9 can catch them? I'm trying to remember.
It was C9. Like the favorites going into spring were, I mean, it was, most people had TL 4th or worse. Just given like
wasn't spring the time where all TL fans were demanding to have Dodo fired for keeping kicked. Dodo and AP or for keeping Yawn and APA? Yeah. I think that was spring.
Yeah, that was.
So they went into spring as favorites, or at least one of the favorites.
One of the favorites, yeah. It was them, NRG, Fly. Yeah.
Got knocked out by FlyQuest and TL 3-0-3-0. They then went 6-1, only losing 3 games and only losing to TL in summer. And then lost to FlyQuest 3-1 and 100 Thieves 3-1. Like, they've won 1 playoffs series in this entire year, and it was against 100 Thieves. Yeah. And I'm afraid it's not Europe, so you can't go through winning only 1 playoff series, guys. Can't make it. It's also a joke, because MDK have won more than them, right?
Yeah, they had a better win rate than MDK, you know?
I mean, sure, but like, come on. At least MDK can win best of 5s.
Against
only
G2.
2 of them, but they can win. No, wait. How many did they win in winter? I need to check this now to make sure that my facts aren't wrong.
Probably 3 or 4 in a winter.
MDK won 2 best of 5. So they won 3 best of 5s over the year, which is better than C9. And C9 aren't going to Worlds.
They only won 2 in a winter, really?
Yeah, they only won because it's before that it's best of 3.
I mean, I think it is worth pointing out that they also beat each of the other top teams like Fnatic, BDS.
Oh, MDK 100% deserved it. Like the problem is you can argue BDS deserved it because they have a higher win rate, right? But they couldn't win in best of 5s. So it's like, well, do you value placing 3rd place consistently, or do you value the team that can actually win the best of 5s when it matters, right?
But this is what is so surprising, right? That I think in the past, C9 would often be very, very strong in the regular season, but where they would really level up and start stomping people was playoffs. So what on earth happened this year, and why is it the opposite? I mean, in spring they were not super dominant in the best of 1s, but it's like they actually did level up at the start of summer, but then when playoffs come around, they start struggling because they beat every other team than Team Liquid in the best of 3s. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's weird.
It is weird. I very much agree with you. FlyQuest against TL. What a banger of a series. That was a fun series to watch.
Oh, yeah.
It was. I still feel like TL are a tier better, even after that one. Like, the games that TL are winning are so much cleaner versus the ones that Fly are winning.
You know, I'm so happy you say that. Sorry for jumping in, but I was reading a lot of reactions to the series afterwards, and a lot of people were like, greatest NA series of all time, so unbelievably close and whatnot. I think it was a great series, but there were so many comments saying it was so close, and I also felt like while there was some back and forth in the games, it felt like Team Liquid were in control pretty much from start till end, because even the games that they lost to FlyQuest, it's like they were just being a little over-eager. They start Baron and they throw at Baron. But it's like these very simple, silly mistakes rather than FlyQuest doing something extremely smart and proactive to beat them.
I mean, they like game 2 they did get clapped, right? Like FlyQuest, they got like 20 kills or 20 plus kills. It was like 20 plus to 3. It took a little bit longer to close out, but I feel like that it's safe to say that was rather one-sided. Even if I agree with the mistakes that you would have out for TL. But the games that are won, like once TL get control, they never let up, and they're pressuring you for 100% of the game.
Yeah.
And the only way that FlyQuest were able to get back into this series at all, or into those games, was through fighting.
Yeah.
And like some of that fighting, sometimes comes from good map play, right? I like FlyQuest and how they overload side lanes. I think that they actually play off each other really well. When Bwipo's able to TP to his side with Quad in the lane, or like they send Masu with Kaisa like to a side lane to see if they get a pick with Bwipo. I think this is a really big strength of FlyQuest. But when those plays don't work out, I mean, A, you're losing tempo on the map, but B, the plays that TL make to get ahead and stay ahead just feel so much more calculated and so much stronger. I was so surprised to see like everyone being like, "Oh, this is close." Like FlyQuest has a chance, because like, I'm watching these games and I'm like, man, especially after the lane swap in Game 5, where you just get smoked in the first lane swap game of the series. Like, it really feels like TL are still head and shoulders above FlyQuest, even if that like read 3-2 at the end.
But even in the game 2, where like you said, FlyQuest did end up having a lot more kills towards the end. It felt like TL was in control for like 25 minutes until they randomly lost their minds and flipped the Baron, lost Baron, and then FlyQuest took over the game. Like, that was my point. That's how every game felt. They are so good at playing the early game and taking full control of it. And when the enemy team has a chance to come back and win, it's because Team Liquid gets a bit impatient or over-eager and over-forces, rather than just playing stable and by the book like they're used to. So I think, from that point of view, it's going to be really, really difficult for a team like FlyQuest to prepare for a potential follow-up versus TL, whereas Team Liquid actually has some pretty easy things to pinpoint and be like, this is where we made a mistake. This is the thing we need to fix, you know?
It sounds a little bit like a G2 situation in Europe, and I know
similar,
I'm European, so I have to talk about G2 all the time, right? Obviously, 2019, woo, Caps was good. The thing for G2 is often when you watch them lose a game, it's like you fought when Gwen didn't have Rabadons, or your Gwen couldn't get on the backline because you drafted her. Why did you draft Gwen, right? But their mid game and their macro and their understanding of removing the opponent from the situation, like something that TL do really well is you don't have to fight to win a game. Like it's sometimes it's not optimal to always force fights to win games. You can force fights, but you can also say, well, we're just going to get so much more on the map by out-rotating you, by out-moving you, by using our lane assignments better, that we're 2k, 3k ahead. And now it's like, well, if you're going to force fights into us, that's cool. We're already winning the game. We'll take those fights. We have half an item to an item advantage across all of our roles, right? And if it's similar with G2. I don't think their early game is at TL's level at the moment, but G2's mid game is so solid compared to European mid games that it's like, well, G2 will just trade up until they're in a position where they have the wallets. And then it's like, cool. Well, now we know we can fight you because we have 3 items, and maybe you have 3 items, but you scale worse than we do. So we'll just take these fights. So yeah, I think I understand where Broxah is coming from. I will say, FlyQuest did a very good job of taking the fights. Like they were fun games to watch, because although TL made mistakes, like in Europe, sometimes we see G2 make mistakes and we watch the other team just stand there and really not do anything, right? Whereas FlyQuest were proactive, they were willing to go into those fights, and because of that, they won 2 of these games. I do think TL are still definitely favorites for the finals, but this gave me some hope for FlyQuest, although the hope isn't enough to overcome TL.
It's been a double-edged sword for them, I feel like, and it's partly the Bwipo effect, I want to say, that Bwipo has always been so incredibly good at playing super aggressive, but it's like his biggest strength and his biggest weakness at the same time, because sometimes that aggression becomes over-aggression, especially if he feels there's a lot of pressure on him to carry, and he doesn't, take a step back to allow others to do the job. And I feel like we've seen that from him more during his stay in North America than we did in Europe, where he has some fantastic games, but he also has some really, really rough games. And we did see both sides this series as well.
Yeah, very true. So we're still all aboard the TL, probably still the best team in the West.
Yep, as strongman board as I was for C9 going to Worlds. That's as strongly on board as I am as TL being the best team, in at least NA, and they're probably going to win.
I said in the West. So
in the West.
They'll cut out the bit where I said probably the best team in the West, and you said really strongly on board, and that's what's going on in the clip.
Outstanding.
That's what we're putting up there. I still think that it's all like it's going to be basically impossible to judge because we only get to watch TL versus NA teams and we only get to watch G2 versus EU teams, right? So in actuality, we can say what they do well, but we can't say how they'd match up against each other. I lean on the side of TL more because of they've consistently done the same things and they've done them really well. Whereas G2 have kind of leveled up again a little bit, but they also leveled up against Fnatic, who have shown us that sometimes they struggle against G2. So
I think my ranking right now, and this might also be one of
Jankos,
those things that I
then Broxah,
regret
then
saying in the
Diamond
future.
Broxah.
No. I think Team Liquid versus G2 would be extremely close. In the same way, I think a Fnatic versus FlyQuest would be extremely close. But I think if we go to the third place teams, MDK would completely stomp 100 Thieves. That's how I feel about it right now. Like, again, I think on paper, from what we've seen over the past months, Team Liquid does look stronger than G2 currently going into Worlds. Of course, we haven't seen the LCS Grand Final yet, but that's how I feel now. But I also feel that overall, EU has a little bit more to offer generally when we go down the list. It's not much. The difference is not as big as we made it out to be a couple of years ago, but I think an MDK or BDS on paper does look a lot better than 100 Thieves, C9 and Dignitas.
Yeah, okay, I can see that. I that's funny. I feel like the narrative's kind of been flipped for the majority of the year. But
yeah, the old narrative
Yeah.
is G2 is well and head and shoulders above everyone, and then NA's better after that, right?
yeah,
It's changed a lot. Like, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I want to see TL versus G2. Honestly, like
So
I don't
do I.
really care what form G2's in right now. I have so much faith in them as a team to just peak at the right time. Like even like this split, right? Like they peaked when they needed to, and come Worlds, they're gonna peak. MSI, like they peaked at a really good time. I felt like G2 had a fine tournament. I really want to see that matchup, and we'll see who wins. I think both teams are pretty good. I am curious to see how much 100 Thieves levels up, because they have the most room to grow, right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think that'd be really interesting. I wonder if they'll fly over to do EU bootcamp, because 100 Thieves most likely going to be in play-ins. The third seed from both the LEC and the LCS will be going into play-ins. So I think we expect Fly to beat 100 Thieves. Agreed?
Yeah, they should.
Yes.
Yeah,
And then TL to win?
yeah.
Cool.
Yes.
Nice. Sorry.
I think the play-ins buff can actually be really solid as well. Like, I experienced it myself back in both 2017 and 2020 with Fnatic and Team Liquid, where it doesn't feel good getting third seed in your region, but once play-ins is over, assuming you obviously make it to the group stage, you feel a lot more comfortable playing on stage, and you've kind of found your footing because you've played all those official games. You have longer to practice against teams from other regions and whatnot. And I think for teams like MDK, and again, we're assuming again, but if it's 100 Thieves that gets third, like these teams with all these rookies can really grow so much over the time they have in play-ins, which could make a big difference for them coming into a group stage.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move on to... We were going to talk about LCS MVP and Rookie and LEC MVP and Rookie. Do we quickly want to touch those and just congratulate... Like, does anyone think Cap shouldn't have been a LEC MVP?
Nope.
No.
MVP
Nope.
is Reezy,
Cool.
man.
Does anyone think Impact shouldn't have been LCS MVP?
Nope.
That one
That-
is even more emphatic.
That one was even more clear, yeah.
Yeah. And
Easy
remember,
vote.
it's across the whole year. So, like, I could see an argument that someone contributed more to that. I could see an argument that Elioya did more for MDK across the whole year that Caps did. But I still think you have to be consistently winning, like, if you want to get an MVP.
I
right?
was thinking Razorg, actually.
I mean, I can
Interesting.
also see Razzle, right? Like, 100%. But G2 did the Grand Slam. Caps was their best player. Obviously, like, when Caps is on form, G2's on form, right? That seems to be how it works. LEC Rookie got announced a couple of moments ago. It is Jackie's who has won it. I think there's a little bit more debate as to who you would have given LEC Rookie. I think Jackie's played really well. and I think he had a great rookie year. But go ahead.
Did you put in a voting for this medic? Do you know when the votings came out?
I did put in a vote, and it was before this weekend.
So it wasn't only before this weekend, because I checked my email just a moment ago to be sure I remember the timing right. I put in my vote, like, right when season finals began. So in, like, mid-August. And what you need to remember is that MDK looked really incredible in spring. No, sorry, in winter.
Yeah.
They looked bad in spring and in summer. And then they started picking it up, surprising everybody by starting season finals, beating G2. And then they looked really good throughout season finals. So I can't remember from the top of my head what I voted. But I remember I was comparing Jackies to a lot of the MDK players. And I'm pretty sure I put Jackies as number one, because at the time the voting needed to be done, he looked more impressive.
Yep.
But if I were to vote now, Myrven would probably have been my number one.
Really?
I think so. I think you could also make an argument for some of the other MDK players.
Yeah, I was thinking
like
Alvaro.
Yeah, I was about to say like an Alvaro, even a Super. I don't think Friscari would be part of it, but I think they have a lot of incredible players. It's just the time of the voting was, for MDK, extremely unfortunate, and if it happened, like, let's say right after the G2 series instead of right before, it would have been one of those guys, I'm pretty sure.
So here's a vibe check, and I'm only going to put it out there. You couldn't vote for Ice. He played in the LCK for Live Sandbox. However, he only played one split for them, and I don't think he played that many games. I think he played like 2 games. Would you have voted for Ice? I think he played 3 games, actually, because that's the amount you have to play before you're eligible, to be ineligible. Would you have voted for Ice if you could?
Yes, I would have put Ice over any of them. So, my MVP voting was 1 Caps, 2 Razork, 3 Ice. And again, with the timing and all, BDS did look like the clear third best team. Ice was by far their best player. He has been overall the best AD carry throughout the year in Europe. So I think Ice does deserve a lot of praise.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he so consistently carried BDS out of situations where they shouldn't have won. I'm just checking to make sure I got the amount of games he played for Live Sandbox, right? Because people always get mad. Ultra Liga, Challengers... Okay, no, he played more than 3 games. He played an entire split for them. So he's definitely not eligible. Definitely not eligible.
What do you think, Cubby? It looks like you're thinking a lot.
I don't know. I feel like Alvaro was actually kind of my vote. I know this is going back to like winter bias a little bit. I feel like out of all the rookies, like Jackie's was flashy, but I also think that Jackie's got picked a lot, and that kind of led to their team losing at times. And so I feel like this rookie vote was like, we must prop up the next EU mid laner that's coming up. And I think Jackie's is good. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I mean, at the least, like, he should still be in LEC, right? I'm excited to see how, like, where he goes from here. But I felt like Alvaro, at times, out of all the rookies, like, outside of just, like, Ice, did have the biggest impact on his team. Like, his play, especially in winter, was, like, he was legitimately one of the top supports. I feel like he peaked higher than a lot of the other rookies in terms of where he postured in his role. I know he didn't continue that, but I also never really felt like he was the problem on MDK. I feel like the problem was that they didn't peel for Supa ever in team fights, especially in summer, and that changed and they experienced more success. Yeah, it may or may not be Alvaro's, depending on the meta and the champs being played. Sure. You know. But
yeah, I think I voted for Alvaro. I can't remember off the top of my head. I can see the Jackie's votes as well. And as Maz says, like it was 2 months ago, right? Like, or a month and a half ago. It was before season finals happened. It's always the problem with these votes where you put them in and then a player wins 1v9 10 games in a row, and it's like, well, now I look like an absolute idiot, right? And you can argue 10 games shouldn't affect a whole year-long vote, but when it's in the most important tournament of the year, it kind of should. Moving on to the most important tournament of the year, Worlds predictions. So, the Worlds Plains draw happened. We have MDK. So Odo fucked us again, by the way.
The final boss Odo was so
great, right?
that was so funny. That was so
really
good.
MDK are playing up against Viking Esports, who are the second team from the VCS. Then PSG on the same side of the bracket will play the first team from the CBLOL. So expectations are that PSG will win that match. In fact, they should, as they are so consistently, they just win. It's still the Azure, Ginger, Maple, Betty, Woody combination. Gigabyte Marines will play up against... Oh, sorry, they're just called GAM now. I always forget. GAM Esports will play up against Soft Hawk Banks, which is Ebby's team from Asia Pacific. And then the third seed of the LCS, we expect to be 100 Thieves, will play up against Rainbow 7, who are a good team. But they are from the LLA, and the LLA doesn't consistently do that well at international competitions. For example, Estral, who made it to MSI, placed second last in the group, I believe. Yeah. So what are our thoughts? Do we have any thoughts? Maybe it's too early for thoughts.
I haven't done my homework on all the teams, but I know that PSG's decent.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that if any team's gonna surprise or get through outside of just the EUNA squads, I do think that PSG actually have a chance to do some damage.
So I believe it's the top 4 make it through.
Oh, top 4?
Yeah, it's double elimination, and the bracket switches when you're eliminated. So my expectation, as you say, is hopefully 100 Thieves and MDK. Then I expect PSG. And then I'm kind of in a toss-up between GAM and Vikings. And I know that's weird. I just have this thing about Vikings. I feel like they're going to be better than they should be. Because GAM was VCS number 1, and Vikings is VCS number 2. Or Vietnam, number 1, number 2. But GAM do look really good. So I think NA got the easier side of the bracket. Because Vikings also look solid. And NA should be able to be... I keep having to say NA because we don't actually know which team it is. I'm not trying to use that as NA should beat these guys. We just don't know the teams. Should be able to beat Rainbow 7. And then... hopefully can beat GAM. Mad Lions Koi will probably get knocked out at Plains because that's kind of what we do. Actually, LCS is very lucky that you're not sending FlyQuest to the Plains, most likely, right? Because they'd get knocked out like MDK because that's kind of their, that's our shtick. But now you have 100 Thieves who will definitely make it through. Much more exciting.
Without having seen a lot of play for Vikings, I did think pretty highly of Shogun and I believe
I can't remember.
Yeah, it was. That's the support though that was with Shogun the last time. I don't think it was.
I think they were on GAM together, weren't they? I haven't done my research yet as well. Yeah, they were on GAM. Oh no, it was Artemis and Bai at Worlds 2023.
Yeah.
They lost to GAM and they were on Team Wales.
Yeah. Because I forget the support that played with Shogun last time. I thought was actually really good.
Let me find it because I remember it as well.
That was Saigon Buffalo, and that was Yari. No, hold on.
You thinking of Taki from World?
Taki. Yeah, Taki was Taki was actually legitimately good.
It was, and also that's SOFM's team. So we kind of have to root for them a little bit because SOFM.
Yeah.
Pretty cool guy. But yeah, that's Worlds.
I want to touch on one thing.
Oh, hit me.
You didn't mention CBLOL at any point, did you?
Yeah, no, CBLOL...
I think you left them out, and I thought that was interesting.
Well, we don't know the seed. We don't know the team yet.
No, but I've played the Brazilian teams a lot in the past, in both scrims and official games. And I think they usually come in as a bit of a dark horse for me, because they don't always manage to surprise and make it to the group stage, but they usually have some pretty solid teams over there that can at the very least take a game or two from legitimate teams. And we don't know yet if it's going to be Pain Gaming or Vivo Keat Stars, but I just think you can never fully underestimate CBLOL and the Brazilians. So
yeah,
I don't know. When you mentioned who the fourth one would be, they were the first one that came to my mind. And again, I don't know the strength of each of the teams outside of NA and EU too well right now, but
yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised seeing them make it through. Is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
I've got some homework to do. Which
Keys actually have Smiley. Can you remember Smiley, Mats?
I definitely do. You know, the first time I played a LAN event outside of Denmark in person, or like, I think it was my first time. I played for the UK League for like a couple months in 2016, went to the finals in London, and then we got stomped in the final, which sucked. And some of the players that were on the team were XD, Smiley, and Larsen, actually.
The team name was Team Larsen, I'm pretty sure. Or was it M&M? You could have lost to either of those.
It was M&M. It was
M&M. Okay.
They played together. So I have some memories from back then, so many years ago. Quite funny how sometimes players just they might randomly go to a different region, and now suddenly the guy is about to play the finals in Brazil. Pretty cool, actually.
That's gonna be really cool. All right. Well, before we round out, anything more we want to say? Any questions you want to ask of our audience for them to reply, and then we answer the question back? Anything you guys want to talk about while we round it out? I'm not very good at hosting. I'm kind of just waffling.
Please act like the tier list discussion never happened and leave me alone. Thank you. I have no more to add.
I got nothing.
I did actually have something. Wait, I've lost it now. Flip. I opened up the global contract database for Europe because I was like, I wonder whose contracts are expiring. A lot of players' contracts are expiring, guys. The Antonio's contract's expiring. Juhan's contract's expiring. Ignar's contract's expiring. Oscar's contract's expiring. Wait, I had more. Basically, all of BDS's contracts are expiring. Yankos's, Perks's, Xerxes, who apparently is with Heretics, must be on their second roster. Cabo, Bo, Saken, Upset, Kana, Vladdy's contract's expiring. Do we think we'll see any cool movement? Any of these names jumping out to you? All of BDS's contracts are expiring. Irrelevant's contract's expiring.
Ooh. That Irrelevant's an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
I expect KC to re-sign Vladdy.
Okay, I agree.
And then I don't know. I'm kind of curious what kind of movement happens from there. I mean, we'll see what the weekers start to give us, as we move forward. But yeah, like you got to assume for some of these teams, off seasons now that EU Masters is wrapped up, especially or EMEA.
It's already started.
Yeah,
it's already begun.
Yeah.
Adam came out as a free agent, I think, last week.
Yep.
And Janax looked really good in EMEA Masters. So my assumption is that Janax is going to get promoted. Will Kedui find an AD carry spot? All these questions.
There's also a question mark surrounding some people like Anodo Amno or Finn that had a difficult year, but that have showed a ton of promise and had great years in the past, right? But I think that the first name that catches my mind is definitely an Irrelevant, because this guy on the right team could definitely turn into an absolute monster top laner for Europe. He's just been a bit unfortunate that he's been stuck on a team that hasn't had too much promise yet, but I would love to see what this guy can do on a top 3 team.
Totally agreed. Well, that's that for now. Thank you very much for joining us for the jungle. I've been Medic. That over there somewhere is Broxah, and over somewhere else is Cubby. I don't know the direction still. We'll be back in the future, and we'll see you then.